Welcome everyone to our webinar on, I think we all agree, is what is one of the most pressing and complicated issues our world is facing today, which is how to achieve lasting peace in Israel and Palestine. My name's Jonathan Leighton, and I'm delighted and honored to be joined by four remarkable individuals who are committed to the cause of building peace and are taking steps to help bridge the divide between Israelis and Palestinians, despite the huge challenges. We're hoping that this webinar will represent one small step forward on the road towards peace, that it will help to spread some important messages and ideas and provide support to peace activists, but also inspire others to believe that peace is not only still possible, but in fact is the only solution. So the webinar will last about an hour and a half. The first hour will be devoted to discussion, and then we'll have about 30 minutes for Q&A. So you can type any questions you have in the Q&A chat, and we'll select some of them to be read out to the panelists. So before I introduce our guests, I'd just like to say a few quick words about OPIS, the Organization for the Prevention of Intense Suffering, which is hosting this webinar. OPIS is a think and do tank dedicated to the simple but powerful idea that there's nothing more important than preventing the intense suffering of sentient beings. And we promote this principle as a basis for how we would like our societies to be governed. And we also call attention to some of the specific ways that suffering can be prevented. For example, through better legal access to effective pain medications, or through an end to the torture and abuse of animals on factory farms. Now, the conflict between Israel and Palestine has obviously been the source of horrendous suffering on both sides for many decades. And the past months have seen a terrible new peak in violence. And so a peaceful resolution would obviously spare future generations more of the suffering. But there's an additional related point. We think that recognizing the prevention of intense suffering as a core principle, extended empathetically to those on both sides of this conflict, could be a key element to promote as part of a successful peace process. Because once you see that the other side genuinely cares about your own suffering as well, the possibilities for dialogue and reconciliation increase dramatically. And putting a concern for suffering at the core helps to stabilize compassionate values that can ensure a lasting peace. Now, that's all I want to say right now about OPIS. And it gives me great pleasure now to introduce our guests. One of them seems to be missing, and I hope she'll be joining us in the next minutes. So Maoz Inon is an Israeli peace entrepreneur who has launched multiple tourism projects to help people get acquainted with other cultures with whom they share the land. Maoz's parents were tragically killed by Hamas in the October 7th attack, when a rocket fired by Hamas caused their house to burn down. But since the attack, Maoz and his family have been speaking out in favor of peace rather than revenge and more suffering. Maoz has been giving many interviews, including one on the BBC a few months ago, which I found emotionally powerful and compelling. And I immediately contacted Maoz to see how we could collaborate. So Maoz, a big thank you for your amazing positive energy, despite the adversity that you've experienced.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you for inviting me here to this webinar, and also for reaching out after you saw my interview. Your support and empathy was exactly what I was needed back then, just in the mid-October. And your care and believing and supporting a lasting peace between the river to the sea is a tremendous help and support, and very encouraging to all of us. So I want to thank you, and I wish us all a very interesting and successful webinar. Thanks.
Thank you, Maoz. I'm just checking. I think Hiba will be. There's a message from Hiba, so let me just see if she's on her way. Well, I think this is sort of symbolic of the conflict that she's been stuck at a checkpoint near Ramallah. So has all kinds of personal and practical and logistical implications. But maybe I'll introduce Yume next, and I'll introduce Hiba as soon as she joins. So May Pundak is a human rights lawyer, and she's the Israeli co-CEO of A Land for All, which is an Israeli-Palestinian movement that also proposes a two-state confederation, as does Hiba Husseini, and we'll be talking more about Hiba in a few minutes. May's been in the news a lot recently, and she'll be telling us about her organization's proposal for a two-state confederation. And by the way, I'd just like to mention that May is also the daughter of Ron Pundak, who is one of the key initiators of the Oslo peace process, carrying out some of the first back-channel negotiations with the Palestinians. So May has in some way been following in his footsteps while offering a new progressive direction to peacemaking efforts. Hamze Awawde is a Palestinian peace activist and conflict resolution expert based in Ramallah, though he's currently joining us from Italy, where he temporarily moved with his family for safety reasons on October 8th. Hamza has been working with the organization Hands of Peace, and he told me he's also had various contacts with high-level US and French officials, among others, sharing with them his insights on the situation on the ground. And Hamza was recently interviewed on the BBC, together with Maoz's brother Magen, whom he met at a peace vigil in London. So a big welcome to all of you. I'm going to introduce Hiba, even though hasn't been able to join us yet. So Hiba Husseini is a lawyer who works out of Ramallah, and she's from an old Jerusalemite family. Hiba was the chair of the legal committee for the Palestinian negotiating team in the mid to late 1990s and early 2000s, when a peace agreement seemed at the time very near at hand. And more recently, Hiba has been the co-architect of a new peace proposal for a two-state confederation, together with Yossi Beilin, the former Israeli justice minister, who was also a key architect of the Oslo Accords, as well as the Geneva Initiative. So I look forward to Hiba joining us and sharing with us some of the details of her plan and her vision. So again, a big welcome to all of you. And I thought now it would be nice to hear a little bit more from each of you about your own background and to share anything you'd like people to know about you. And also in particular, how you're feeling at the moment, advocating for peace against the backdrop of all this violence and polarization that's occurring. Maoz, would you like to start?
Yeah, I'll do whatever you tell me you ask for. So thanks again for everyone. It's great to speak with Hamze and Mai, and shortly with Hiba. I was born in Kibbutz Niram, just off the Gaza border, 48 years ago. My both parents were born in two kibbutzim in the area, and my grandparents from both sides immigrated to Palestine under the British mandate at the 1930s. And they were Zionist pioneers and founded the kibbutzim. And in my father's kibbutz, when my parents moved to live after they got married, my parents raised my three sisters and my young brother and myself. At the age of 14, we moved to Netiv Asara. It's a nearby community and even closer to the Gaza border, about just on the borderline, basically. In the last 20 years, I've been initiating and entrepreneuring several business, social, and political initiatives. From the first guest house ever in the old city of Nazareth, the largest Palestinian city within Israel, in order to create a shared interest and a shared vision between Jews and Arabs living in Israel. And I found at the age of, the idea came at the age of 30, after traveling around the world and seeing how tourism can empower local community and build bridges between communities and between tourists. And I realized I have no Arab friends. I just had zero Arab friends. I didn't know the difference between the important days of the Islam, Ramadan, Eid al-Fitr, and Eid al-Adha. And I didn't know nothing about Christianity either, where Jesus was born, where he's buried, and where he was announced about his coming, coming and birth. So I said, I'm just going to open a business in an Arab community. And that's how, at the age of 30, together with my wife, we opened a guest house in the old city of Nazareth, which became a landmark for the city of Nazareth and showing the way for more than 40 locals, entrepreneurs, families, private people who open more and more hospitality properties, from high-end boutique to guest houses, hostels, and family stay. And together with an American partner, we developed the Jesus Trail. It's a hiking trail going through the Galilee, going through a Jewish, Christian, and Muslims community, and again, bridging and creating a shared interest for those communities. And since 2010, I am a co-founder and one of the partners of Abraham Hostel and Tours. We operate in Israel, Palestine, with Palestinian partners on various tours that we are offering, and the same in Jordan and recently in Egypt. And what I've been doing in the last 4 years is taking Jewish Israeli groups into the old city of Nazareth and basically preaching them that the first step in reaching a shared society is by knowing the other side narrative. There is no reason or point in arguing or trying to convince each other about our narratives, but there is a fundamental need to know the other side narrative. And only by knowing that, we can start building a shared future. And basically, all my life prepared me for October the 7th. Nothing, though, even though nothing can prepare you, how you will react, or what you will think, or what your feeling will be if your both parents, loving parents, supporting parents, will be murdered in a massive terrorist attack with 18 other members of their community, with hundreds more people from our communities, people that I've been to school together. I know their parents, I know their children. Many of them were murdered, some were kidnapped and being held hostages. So nothing can prepare you for such a tragedy. But the first thing, or the second, when we just grouped together, my sisters and my brother alone, was we say that we want our tragedy to have a human and humanity message. And we want our message to be that we are not calling for a revenge. We don't know no one and nothing to revenge the killing of our parents. We don't want the cycle of death, the cycle of blood, the cycle of hate and fear to continue. We must stop this cycle. And this is what I've been doing for the last 3 months, calling for immediate ceasefire, calling for release of all hostages, and creating, and I will start using Hamze words. Hamze has been my teacher for the last 3 months. I'm working with many others to create hope and to make peace. And I've decided to devote my life that there will be no more suffering, no more innocent people between the river to the sea that will be victims to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Thank you, Maoz. Beautiful words, and we all join you in this vision. Hamza, would you like to tell us a bit about your background?
Thanks, Jonathan, for
and
having
your
this.
work?
Yes, sure. Yeah, I just want to say that Oz and his brother were really the light of these dark days. I mean, I couldn't imagine since October 7th and the aftermath to go through this without people like Maoz and his brother and May and all these people who did not give up and even became more dedicated to this work. So I was born in the south of the West Bank in a town called Dura. I was born during the first Intifada, and soon Oslo Agreement happened, and there was this change where Palestinians were allowed to govern themselves with the limited sovereignty, and hope was growing among people that there will be a peaceful solution. People in Palestine and Israel starting to live their life fully and started to dream. Of course, this provoked the radicals who saw peace as a threat for their vision, for the radical vision, and worked hard to undermine the peace process. And then a second intifada happened, which was, until that point, the worst thing that we could have exposed to: tremendous suffering and huge death, extreme violence, and we had people, losing hope about any peaceful solution. My family, my grandfather was a fighter with Fatah. He fought many years and was killed eventually by the Israeli army. Everyone in my family has been suffering under the occupation and activists in their own way. When I went to university at age 18, I wanted to be activist too, and do whatever I can to reject the reality that I'm forced to live under. Honestly, rationally, nothing made sense for me except peace, because it's in the game of the violence, in the game of forcing the other side to obey. We will never end this cycle, because for many years, both have tried to use their maximum power to settle the account with the other side, just to make the situation even worse and people to live in a shrinking space of life. I joined first informal meeting between Israeli and Palestinian youth. We spoke respectfully, we disagreed respectfully, but we all agreed that the future is really highly uncertain if we don't do tangible steps on the present for a possible change in the future. But in the age of populism, we see politicians are doing exactly the opposite. They are, exploiting the power of people's trauma and people's lack of trust with each other in order to gain political power. And it worked. It worked, and we have over the years more extreme politicians, or politicians who do nothing. They might be not extreme in their views or ideological, but they exploit religion and exploit fantasies to gain power. I really didn't have hope at any point, and this was motivating me, because if there was hope, I wouldn't need to do that. I wouldn't care. But because there's no hope, we have to do something, and even if it's not popular, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. Especially knowing how people are really traumatized when it comes to the conflict. They're not rational. So we try to professionalize this work to make it more impactful and appealing to the people. So I worked with youth group, like young adults, people above age 18 for many years through social media. And then in my recent job, I was working with teenagers, Jewish, Palestinian, and American teenagers. And you can see when you bring them together to America, they are like brothers and sisters. You wouldn't notice who's Israeli, who's Palestinian, who's American. But then when they go back, the Palestinians go back to live under the occupation, and the Israeli go to the army, and the American, they go to their own life, which shows that the problem is not the people. The problem is the system, the imbalance, the structure that is not working for people. I tried also to carry this message to politics and politicians, whoever I want to hear. I try to force myself to events and meetings to ring the bell, because ultimately it's about us, it's about Israelis and Palestinians and our future generations. It's our responsibility. We should do it regardless if we will succeed or not, because we will be satisfied at least about our role that we played in this hard times. And this is what motivates me, and also the nice people I work with. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Hamze. Hiba, I'm glad you were able to join us, and sorry for the obstacle. I guess that's not a new occurrence.
Thank you so much. Sorry for being late.
No, we're delighted you can join us. I've already introduced you. I hope I got the details right. Basically, I told about your central role in negotiations in the mid to late 90s, early 2000s, and about your new peace proposal. I'll come back to you shortly to ask you for more details on that, but maybe you can also tell us a little bit more about your background, anything you'd like to share with us about your, the work you do trying to bring peace to the region, and also how you feel right now given the situation and all the violence that's happening. Anything that you feel like sharing with us.
You want me to go now or after May?
Please, go ahead right now.
Well, actually, I was listening on the while I was in the car, so I did join from the early start. So I heard the introduction. First of all, thank you for this opportunity. Second, and most importantly, Maoz, my deep condolences for the loss of your parents. And I think the same goes for every single loss during this devastating, horrific, distressing period of war and suffering and pain and human loss of life. It's very sad, and we should not be going through it. We should have risen above it. Unfortunately, we have not. And here we are having one discussion after the other, and experiencing personal losses, personal pains, national losses, national pains, and of course, a global trauma even. Everyone is personally here, and in Israel is traumatized, each one of us in our own way. I don't remember a day. I mean, I was 5 years at 67. I remember that war, and I remember the impact it had on me. But maybe as a child, I did not feel the impact of the war that I feel today. Perhaps the scale as well and the longevity of it. I carry with me some of the pains of 1967, and I carry with me the pains of my parents in 48, and even before that. My family, as you said, is from Jerusalem. We've been here for centuries, and my grandparents, great-grandparents, great-uncles and aunts, and everybody suffered. I have so many family members who in 1967 lost their residency here in Jerusalem. So for all intents and purposes, they are refugees in a way. I mean, different categories of refugee status, driven out of their home in a way as well, not in the same sense as 1948 refugees, but similarly a loss of a homeland, a loss of a nation, of a loss. And so the identity is affected, of course, by all of this. So I think this is really having grown up with the residues of 1967 as a child, and hearing about 48, where my parents on my mom's family side took refuge in Syria and then were able to return in the 50s. They were fortunate because they were able to return back to Jerusalem. But we lost a lot of property and family members in Jaffa and Ramla and Lidda and all these Palestinian cities that are now part of Israel. I think this entire background prompted me from day number one to really dedicate myself to peace. And so since 1994, 93, I have been working towards peace, and I hope to achieve it during my lifetime. I hope out of the ashes of this horrible war, we can find in ourselves a path where the narrative, as Maoz said, the narrative that is so hard for each side to process can be something of an acknowledgement on both sides that we both have our own different narratives, but in the same vein, we don't have to agree on the narrative, but we have to respect and honor the narrative and association to this land. This land is a sacred land. It's a holy land. It's a land that can have space for everyone. And it's a space where we can have, we can live and coexist. I mean, it's amazing during the days when the relationship is, let's say, cordial, how people coexist in Jerusalem. I mean, people don't realize how much the coexistence, in a sense, and acceptance there is in Jerusalem. And I'm sure while there are a lot of issues for the Arab Israelis, the Palestinians of Israel, who are citizens of the state of Israel, there are a number of issues, of course, in terms of assimilation, in terms of access, in terms of right and participation in political life and so forth. But also there has been coexistence there. And I think the new generation, both in Israel and Palestine, I hope will become, in due course, as healing takes place, because we don't expect it to happen immediately, there will be more of an understanding and an appreciation to where each of us are coming from. And this is something, you know, eventually, if you want to talk about the federation, I could, but because in the federation document, Dr. Beilin and I have a chapter on the narrative. It's a factual rendition, but it's a big statement. We don't argue the emotions, we don't argue the trauma, but we factually lay out our history and association to the land. And I think this is something that I think this current war has brought to bear in terms of our desire as Israelis and Palestinians to move forward, notwithstanding the spoilers, notwithstanding the extremism, notwithstanding the some minority decision makers or minority politicians who have hijacked really this sacred land and this holy land for their agendas. And I think the majority of people want to live in peace, as Hamze said, and wants to end, especially for us, the Palestinians, we want to end the occupation. And we want to end the state of terrible hostility and resentment and rejection of the other. And I shall stop at this point.
Thank you so much, Hiba. Let's go to you, May. Tell us a little bit more about your background and what brought you to where you are now, and also how you're feeling at the moment with everything that's going on.
Yeah, thank you. I'm scared to start answering the how am I feeling. I admit. I think so I will dodge that question and say that it is you know, I think the four of us have the I don't know what to say. We're brave enough, but also have the privilege of working with Israelis and Palestinians on a daily basis. And that's on one hand, it's a very heavy price. It's very difficult, but it's also such a gift, because we don't, you know, we're not bearers of hope. We do the work. And so I just want to say that I think that for us, I don't know, I can speak for Maoz and for me at least. But I think that it goes for all of us that it's pretty natural for us to be here together, the four of us. But I want to say how special this is. Because most I can say about Israel, I think I can say about Palestine as well. I can definitely say about the US. The discourse is so binary and such a zero-sum game. And Israel, you know, we do not know what's going on in Gaza. We just don't see it. The entire media is committed to maintaining this narrative right now of revenge, and you know, Maoz and me and our partners are doing a lot of work to try to penetrate that like wall. But I think it's an example of how unique it has become to do this work right now. And so I want to say thank you to you, Jonathan, and also thank you for, you know, Hamze and Hiba and Maoz, and thank you for everyone here joining us, for choosing not to fall into that zero-sum game mentality, which I want to say that October 7th has taught us a lot of things. But one thing we know, this conflict needs to end. It needs to end. It needs to end now. And it will not end with shrinking the conflict or managing it or normalizing it. It will not end with a military strategy, or rather lack of strategy. It will end with a peace, sustainable peace agreement. It will end with peace. And I want to say another thing. I went through, you know, I'm every day is a new chapter, right? But I know that in the past few years, I had to learn the hard way, and Hamze maybe alluded to that in talking a little bit about the classic people-to-people work that sometimes maintains the power dynamic. I am doing this work for myself. I'm doing this work for my children. I'm doing this work because this is my home. This is my only home. And if I won't fight for it, I won't have a home anymore. And I know because this is what history teaches us. I know because I'm a human being. And I know because even within the Israeli narrative, we have the 73 war to teach us that in order to achieve safety and security for our children, we need sustainable peace, period. And so I say this because I think that I want to assume that the people here, you know, we share values. We share a commitment to justice and to equality. We share a commitment to individual and to collective equality. We share a commitment to human rights and to international law. But I think it's very, very important to also say, as we are trying to shape this historic moment, and it is a historic moment, we are trying to shape it in order to make an opportunity out of this crisis. Is I feel not enough of a word to explain what's going on. This hell. And so I want to say that because I think that as we are trying to re-articulate the narratives, the ideas, the voices, the values, the principles of how to achieve sustainable peace, I can already start, and maybe we'll do that later, to kind of collect, you know, some ideas that already came up in just 30 minutes of what that peace should look like. What is the language we need to articulate when we talk about the end game or the future or a sustainable future? But I want to say that one thing that I have learned, and that has become a northern star for me, beyond the fact that I have to admit that I'm doing it for myself and not for anyone else, is that Israeli-Palestinian partnership, is that Palestinians and Israelis coming together to do this work, is that realizing that no one is going anywhere, not Israelis and neither Palestinians are going anywhere, and that we share, fortunately or unfortunately, much more than we care to think about. And if we don't move away from paradigms of isolation and separation, that, by the way, connecting to what Hiba said earlier, right? the place where we see the most isolation and the biggest walls and the biggest, that is Gaza. That's the place with the most violence. The place where we see, for now, because the situation is getting worse and worse, we see the most, at least people are not dying on a daily basis in the streets, are 2 million Palestinians who live in Israel as citizens. And these are the same Palestinians who live in Gaza. Their cousins are in Jaffa or in Haifa. It's the cousins, it's the same families. And so if we don't change that mentality of moving away from thinking that Gaza and Palestinians are, you know, ISIS and Iran, and realizing that Israelis and Palestinians share water, share land, share the air, share climate change challenges, share healthcare, right? COVID or the humanitarian crisis, health issues that are coming from Gaza, they don't stop in checkpoints. If we don't change that mentality and realize that we have to fight together for a sustainable future while taking care of our own interests, while taking care of our own safety and security, I am terrified that we will perhaps lose this moment and opportunity. And so and as I ended this with a lot of fear, maybe because fear and anxiety is really all around us, I will also just say one thing about hope, which is we're here, we're doing the work. Again, and Maoz and I can give a testament of how much interest and growth we are experiencing in our work. So many people are eager to do this work together with us that it gives power, and that's what we're here to promote.
Great. Thanks, May. I had quite a few questions that I had lined up. I don't think we'll be able to go through all of them. But I want to bring up the topic of trauma. Obviously, the October 7th attacks created a collective trauma in Israel where people lost trust in the state to keep them safe. And I think as a result, almost any means was considered okay if Israelis believed it would provide them with security. And so there's been a huge support among ordinary Israelis for a military response. And most Israelis actually approve of the current war and how it's being conducted, despite the massive number of Palestinian casualties. And so many Israelis and supporters of Israel will, they'll say, well, what's the alternative? And as a result, the too much empathy for the victims is regarded like a distraction. So, obviously it's not possible to undo what's happened in the past 3 months, but I still think it's worth asking, what other approaches could a more enlightened Israeli government have taken that wouldn't have had such devastating consequences for the Palestinian population? Would any of you like to have a shot at answering that?
I would start, if it's okay, first with the trauma you mentioned. We are all traumatized, everyone. And one of the best cure for traumatized person, individual, or nationality or a state is creating a meaning. If we'll create a meaning for the traumatized, if it's due of illness, personal loss, or the impact of devastating wars we are experiencing now, if we'll be able to create a meaning for the traumatized person or a nation, it's a great step in curing this individual or nation. And what greater meaning than lasting peace can we find? Lasting peace is the greatest meaning for human being. So I think we should present this cure and offering it. First, I'm offering it to myself first, but for my family and for everyone I meet or talk to. So let's create a meaning. I really don't want to speak about the Israeli government. We were, like Hiba said, we were hijacked by extremists. And for me, they are irrelevant anymore. The government is irrelevant. What's relevant is what we are doing and what we'll create. from this not just historical moment, from this historical opportunity. And here I'm using the lens of the entrepreneur that I am. The bigger the crisis, the higher the opportunity. And we are facing a historical opportunity from our the sacrifice we had to give, and from the suffering we must choose a different path. And exactly like what Mai said, the higher the wall, the lower the security. And from this is why if talk about governments, I wouldn't speak about the Israeli government because they are irrelevant. I would speak about the German and the US governments and administration. By sending us military aid, by helping us building higher wall, the only one who will benefit from that are those who build the walls. But we, people on the ground, we're just gonna lose. So I'm crying for those government. Help us build bridges. We need to build bridges. Then all human beings from the river to the sea will benefit, not just those who build the walls. So I'm calling the international community, I'm calling the international leaders, send us reconciliation aid, send us support, financial support for shared society initiatives. There are so many organizations. Some of them we mentioned already, but there are so many. I made a list of more than 300 organizations, Palestinian, Israelis, and shared organizations that are working to build and create hope and peace. Help us, just like you helped and supported North Ireland with billions of euros through the year, and they didn't achieve a warm peace, but they stopped the violence completely. So support us with peace initiative, with peace aid, not with military aid.
I think it's pretty clear that it's difficult these days to speak out in favor of peace as an Israeli, and a lot of people, even though they believe in peace, they might be afraid to speak up. Do you believe that the more voices are expressed in favor of peace, the easier it will be, and that there's actually a chance that the peace movement in Israel can become strong again, and even stronger than it used to be? And similarly, on the Palestinian side, that as more voices for peace are heard, that Palestinians will feel that this is actually a viable path, that it's okay to talk about peace?
Yeah, it's definitely. I spoke to Jonathan Leighton, the son of Vivian Silver, the Jewish Israeli peace activist, who was also one of the victims. And Jonathan says that peace is a language that we have forgotten. And we need to revive it. And as more as we'll use it, it will be revived faster. So we must use those words, not to be afraid. And I must tell you, it's not difficult. For me, it's very easy. I'm not putting any effort. It's so natural for me to speak about peace. And I used this metaphor before, and if it's okay, I will use it again. When I'm thirsty, I'm asking for water. And 3 months after my parents were murdered, and we are in war, I'm asking for peace. It's the most human things to do. Ask for peace. It's very easy. So I'm asking for peace.
Hamza, you were interviewed recently on CNN by Christian Amanpour, and you said many wise things during that interview. And one of the things you said was that whoever thinks that killing people will weaken Hamas has really never understood anything from history. And another thing you said is we have to take the agency from Hamas by showing an alternative to the people. I was wondering if you'd like to elaborate a little bit more on these comments, because I think there's so much truth in what you were saying there.
Yeah, sure. Hamas is in the business of cashing on the despair of people, on the loss the people had during the conflict. Most of Hamas fighters are orphans. All Hamas fighters in Gaza live under siege, which is an open air prison. There are no economic or social or cultural opportunities. And Hamas comes to them in the time where there are no other visions available to people and tell them, you see, who caused your suffering? Israel. We should at least have them taste some of this suffering. And Israel understand only the language of war and violence, because look at Abbas, he gave Israel all it wants, and he can't even secure his own cities like Ramallah and Nablus and Jenin. And it resonates to people. It resonates to people. They know, they have nothing to lose, and they fight, and they die as heroes. And Hamas grows in this. The more it happens, the more you can recruit people. Now, like 82% of people in Gaza lost their houses. If we don't step in after the war to offer people a different vision, Hamas, even using social media, even if Hamas disappeared from Gaza, which is impossible, even through social media, they will be able to put everybody there to fight like there's no tomorrow. And like, if you wanted security, you would do everything except this carpet bombardment and a collective punishment. Everyone is not innocent, and so you force everyone to side on the side of Hamas. Like, you tell them you have no choice. You will be treated like Hamas, and you are Hamas, and you have to treat us like Hamas treat us. It's very counterproductive. I think the leaders know this. I think they are not stupid. I think they care about their popularity, and that's why they do what the streets want. And this is not leadership. Leadership, the definition of the leadership, is taking the right decisions under the situation of uncertainty, not the populist decision, the right decision. The doctor doesn't ask the patient, how to do the operation. If the patient wants to heal, the doctor does what's necessary, regardless of the opinion of the patient about the specifics of the operation. If we have to end Hamas as a movement or as a security threat, you have to tell people what's the alternative, and you have to show them they have a better option. Right now, no one is offering them any option. And this has been the case for most of the people who are alive now in Gaza, because most of the people are born after Oslo, and all their life, no one ever even played lip service to promise them, even fakely, that they will have a better future. So times to show people other ways, and we have to be honest about it, especially in the international community, that they keep talking about two-state solution, but they don't mean two-state solution, because we judge actions, not words. They tell us all the beautiful things, administration after administration in the US, but they do really nothing tangible for this end. And people are not stupid. They know that the only one right now has vision for them is Hamas. It's a death vision, but it's a vision in lack of other visions. If we really care about people, we could have come up with vision. And there are so many visions, and most of the people really in the normal situation, they're not radical. They don't have crazy fantasies. They want like normal life, like any family all over the world. They love life. People of Gaza are known to love life. Like, they're known, like, I hear from my Gaza friends about their history and the parties they used to have and the food, and they exaggerate with the love of life, and now they are forced to live a zero-sum, like they have a zero-sum game. Either you live and actually it's not possible, or you die fighting or standing. And I think people in this narrow options will choose to fight, and more so than the past. So if before October 7th, we had a comfort zone, things were looking, working, even though not ideal, was bearable suffering. After October 7th, the status quo and the comfort zone was destroyed. Either we go to even more suffering, or we dream big. We have to dream big, and we have to be honest about it. And we have to, even for a minority, I don't think it's only number game, it's also quality. We need people who who are really sure about what they're doing and are able to speak as loud as the radicals. And we need the support of the world. We don't want people who help us to go down. As Maoz said, if you want to send bombs, also send us coffins for the future of our children, because this is not how you help your friend. Also, Iran, whoever wants people to continue on this path, they're not friends, even if they pretend to. Friends, especially who live in healthier situation, like we are traumatized there. Like I understand people, really. I disagree with them, but I understand them. But people who have power, who live in stable countries, and empower our crazy people, and with money, with propaganda, with enabling them to do their atrocities, and they defend them. This is not any healthy reaction to the situation. If you really, like, you can put your agenda clear. You can say, I want this war to continue forever. That's why I'm involved in this way. Otherwise, if you really love even one side, even if you are pro-Palestine or pro-Israel, you should be pro-solution and use all the leverages you have to make the solution sooner than later.
Well, let's talk about some very concrete solutions then that are on the table. And so I'd like to move over to Hiba and to May. And you both developed peace proposals that are both pragmatic and visionary, that take into account the reality on the ground. And that, I would say, offer some of the most attractive features of both a one-state and a two-state solution. So I'd like to hear from each of you about the key features of your proposals, and in particular, in what way do your proposals aim to inspire both Israelis and Palestinians with a vision that isn't just technocratic, but will really meet the respective needs on both sides? Not just the material needs, but perhaps even more importantly, the emotional and spiritual needs of people on both sides. So maybe Hiba, you can go first and tell us some of the salient details about your proposal, and then we'll go to May to hear about some of the ways that your proposal differs or is similar.
The Holy Land Confederation with Dr. Yossi Beilin stems from the very fact that we both believe in the two-state solution, and that, however, that both people can live on this land, the same land in a way. It's a modular process. First of all, it's an enabler to the two-state solution, the Confederation. The most salient aspect as a starting point is as having a sovereign Palestinian state recognized. Then that sovereign state enters into the Confederation. The state of Palestine and Israel would have negotiated the permanent agreement, which includes, of course, the core issues, border settlements, Jerusalem, refugees, and all other details of security. As I said, it has a chapter on narrative. It's the longest chapter, because we both recognize that the narrative must be treated and cannot be ignored. And part of what's happening today is both sides have not dealt in the agreements, in the Oslo agreements, with the narrative. And of course, these narratives shape the discussions, the negotiations, and play in the backs of the minds of each negotiator personally, even. So that's why we tackled it, and that's why we have it as the first chapter. We also have a legal chapter. We have a chapter on Jerusalem. We have a chapter on, of course, as May said, I mean, because we share the environment, the water, the natural resources, the air, everything. I mean, we have a chapter on those elements as well, and economic cooperation and trade matters and so forth. It's a starting point. It's not fully developed as a proposal, but many aspects of it need to be developed. Now, aside from the narrative, two other salient points are raised, which provide the inspiration, if you will, for people to accept it on both sides. Of course, there will be detractors, but with political will, it can provide a vehicle, a legitimate vehicle, again, to enable the two-state solution. Jerusalem, the old city and its holy sites, is an open area with access from the Israeli side for the Israelis and from the Palestinian side of Jerusalem to the Palestinians. East Jerusalem will be the capital of the state of Palestine, of course, taking into account negotiated borders and so forth. The other aspect which is a very important matter for the Israeli settlers who are in the West Bank settlements, some settlements will be swapped, of course. There will be a swap of land, a negotiated swap to determine the borders and which settlements will be part of the state of Israel and which settlements will remain part of the state of Palestine. But for those, the proposal is this: for the settlers who do not wish to leave to Israel and who want to remain in those redeployed areas that have become part of the state of Palestine, if they want to stay, they can stay, but as Palestinian residents, Israeli citizens, but residents of the state of Palestine. If they're so keen on not leaving and they have such an attachment that they want to remain in those West Bank areas, which will be part, of course, of the state of Palestine, again, they are being offered the opportunity to be residents of Palestine, but citizens of the state of Israel. This might be attractive to those Israeli settlers who do not want to leave. It's an interesting notion. We've tested it a little bit, but we didn't develop it further because various events, global events, starting with the Ukraine war and then now the Gaza war, I mean, those precluded us from really discussing it, but there has been an interest, let me put it this way, an interest in the discussion to develop the document further and to test out various aspects of it. Today, Dr. Beilin and I believe that it's a relevant proposal as the October 7th events and the war have shown us that the need to address the two-state solution is certainly very urgent. And the idea in terms of the movement, the concept is to develop along the lines of the EU, where eventually there will be open borders. There will be political borders, but the borders will be open whereby people can move freely back and forth. And so if a Palestinian wants to visit Jaffa, they can certainly visit Jaffa, and so forth and so on.
Thank you, Hiba. May, would you like to tell us a bit about the proposal that you've put on the table with your organization and some of the ways that it might differ from Hiba's two-state confederation proposal?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And I won't talk so much about where we differ. I'll try to just elaborate. I think there are big differences between our proposals, but I think that at this point of time, and I'll quote Dr. Yossi Beilin to create like a smooth transition. But we participated in a panel together a few months ago with I would say a very classic two-state crowd, let's say. And Yossi came and said, okay, I know that you all support the two-state solution. If anyone here can tell me how, that will be great. Because if you continue to talk about the two-state solution, but you still hold the same ideas that are 30 years old, while reality has changed so much, while we have changed, while the power dynamic has changed, while the relationship between Israel and Palestine has changed, while everything we know about climate has changed, so much has changed that if we continue holding so tightly to paradigms and concrete ideas that are 30 years written ago under the political realities of the 1980s, then you might be part of the problem. And so I think that with that, I think that there's something about, I think that the most important thing that we hold shared, and Hiba, correct me if I'm mistaken, is a commitment to a viable peace and making sure that it is both connected to values, both connected to reality, what reality speaks, and I'll say a little bit about that in a moment, and connected to where people are at. And if we don't hit those 3 points and we come on, so our idea will not be acceptable or pragmatic or achievable. And that will be tragic, that will be tragic. And so I think that what we're all committed to doing is putting on the table, Biden has said, there's no going back to October 6th. There's no going back to the status quo. Hamza has said that as well. Everything has changed. There's not going to be a status quo anymore. We cannot hold the status of these cycles. This cannot be another cycle for Israel-Palestine. And so what do we have to put on the table that will actually work this time? So, A Land for All, also known as Two States, One Homeland, is a movement, actually, an Israeli-Palestinian movement that was started 12 years ago. And it was started by Israelis and Palestinians who already in 2011, with the Arab Spring and with the social demonstrations in Israel, felt that the status quo has become the normal, political situation. So there was no more negotiations going on, not formal and neither informal. There was a huge uprising in Israel, but no one was talking about Israel-Palestine. So there were hundreds of thousands of people in the street, but the Israeli-Palestinian conflict was not even mentioned, which is crazy that we have been able to create this imaginary world where the conflict can be managed and not solved. And so this group of people started thinking, what can we do? What is in our power? What have we done wrong? What has changed? What can we offer to push forward something that will be relevant again and make this relevant again? And what they came up with is a political program that I will share in one moment, but I will say that there was a reflexive process of unlearning and relearning, of kind of being able to take off a set of glasses that we have been given and we see reality through, and we never have been asking a lot of questions about. And again, I think this is something that connects the four of us very much. And this is one way to put it, is the paradigm of separation. So in Oslo, we were told that in order to achieve peace, we have to think through us here and there. In Hebrew, it sounds a little more appealing. Anachnu po vehem sham, right? It rings. And it's like basically telling the Israeli public that if we wanted them to kind of swallow Oslo easily and mainly give up land to the Palestinians, and so we will be here and the Palestinians will be behind the wall. We won't have to see them anymore. We won't have to fight. We can forget about them. That resonates with other discourse of like the villa in the jungle that some of us know, right? Of the way that Israel perceives itself as a villa in the jungle. That also connects to the fact that, again, no one's going anywhere. Like there's this moment where you realize, or for me, that was a moment, that the zero-sum game can really not exist. And I'm going to answer your question in a way that, and Hiba said this as well, that's the one homeland mentality. right? And you see this with the river to the sea on one side, and you see this with the necklace of, the Israel map, which is also the Palestine map. And so, and it's probably, we always tell this story in The Land for All, it's probably created in the same factory in China, but one says Israel and one says Palestine, but it's the same map. And if we continue thinking only through separation, isolation, and even only through international law or international law, Western kind of liberal mentalities coming to the Middle East, and not start with where people are at, which is a very strong sentiment and sense of belonging to the entire homeland. That's a fact. So we start with the facts. And I said earlier, I think that the facts, and then we can start talking about water, we can talk about climate, we can talk about health, we can talk about even security. Again, I think that I tried to mention that earlier, but even security for Israeli Jews before October 7th existed mainly because of very tight cooperation and collaboration with the Palestinian Authority. Under occupation, under a system of oppression, and yes, of course. But that's why I had a sense of security, not because of separation and walls, but because of very tight collaboration. So what I'm trying to explain is how the unlearning of this connection, attachment of peace and separation has broken. It needs to be broken, but it doesn't speak reality. It's not achievable, and it's not desirable either. And so what we're trying to do and what we offer, for 12 years now, we've been developing a alternative peace idea based on the two-state solution, but also based on the understanding that there's one homeland, which we share. And the 5 main principles, I'll just say, and you'll notice in these principles, as Hiba mentioned as well, that just by virtue of changing this paradigm and rethinking about reality and the peace agreement, we also have Ani? Zelia shalom? No, shalom. Okay, hi. Hi. That we also are able to step out of some of the classic deadlocks that have prevented us from moving forward in 30 years with the classic 2 states. So the 5 main principles of A Land for All, which I'll just say were agreed on the first meeting of A Land for All 12 years ago and haven't changed since, and have been re-agreed on our first shared Israeli-Palestinian board meeting that happened on October 10th, which I think that is a testament of resilience and of hope, that we have, we still agree on these principles after October 7th and have been working, Israelis and Palestinians as a joint board, towards those means. The principles are 5. One is 2 states, 2 sovereign, independent states, Israel and Palestine. Right for self-determination, acknowledgement that we need to feel that, right? Most Israelis and Palestinians still believe in that. Number 2, one homeland. One homeland, meaning everything I just said about how we share this space, but also talking about shared mechanisms or institutions. Again, very inspired by the EU, for shared institutions for what we need to share: human rights, water, climate, health, borders and security on a certain level, economy. Obviously, having a non-viable economic situation in Palestine will surely create a non-viable reality for Israel. So that has to be part of the game. Number 3, shared Jerusalem. We talk about Jerusalem being the shared capital for Israel and Palestine, inspired a little bit by the Kosovo situation, but really thinking about Jerusalem as a unique shared city, an open city. Number 4, the inspiration for freedom of movement. We are committed to that as a basic human right, but also as a way to exercise our right and our love and our belonging to the homeland. Hiba mentioned a few of the things that we advocate for it as well, but I'll just mention them in a little bit. That's the right of return for Palestinian refugees. That's the ability for some Jews to remain in Palestine as permanent residents. And again, kind of naturally tackling these deadlocks. And I'm happy to elaborate for those who are interested more about that later. And then the fifth principle is not to try to rectify one injustice with the other, which leads us to kind of a more of a transitional justice, more of a restorative justice, more of a reconciliation approach, which is very, very important. And I think tries to actually look at this solution not only as an agreement, but actually as a way forward to a more sustainable future, and making sure that we see it holistically, and we don't start creating even more problems as we try to move forward, which I think has been part of the problem so far.
Thanks, May. I'd like to maybe steer the discussion a little bit more now towards real concrete things that people can do. Now, I've been looking at some of the questions that have been coming in, and I apologize, we don't have time to go through very many, but I'm trying to address some of the spirit of these questions, and but as I said, also to get more of a concrete sense of what people can do. Now, Maoz, you were saying that you think that in some ways the governments are irrelevant, that really it's about the people talking about peace. But I'd still like to ask the question, would it be helpful to have a change in political leadership on either or both sides? Because it's a lot easier to negotiate peace if you have leadership that seeks peace, that believes in peace, and that also represents the population. So one question is there a need for a change in government, new peace parties perhaps on both sides that can sell the message of peace? And then just more in terms of what individuals can do. There's a lot of commentary about the conflict, but very few prescriptions of what people and organizations can actually do to advance peace. So I'd like to ask each of you what concrete things you think that individuals and organizations can do to spread the message and to basically promote the idea that peace is not only a viable, but the only option, and to basically increase contact between both sides so that there's less dehumanization and a move towards seeing people on the other side as people that they can respect and who are partners for peace. So kind of a broad question, but what are your recommendations?
So again, I will start, and again, you ask many questions and we don't have much time, and we also, but I'll try to summarize it. Of course, it will be great if there will be a political change, both in Israel and Palestine, but we cannot wait for it. We cannot wait for more suffering to happen and for more victims. And politician, and I'm not a historian, I'm not a politician, I'm not a scholar, but politicians do what the service says in the public opinion they are doing. So only if we change the public mind through amplifying the voices of peace, the calls for peace, the cry for peace, if we'll be able to change the perception that peace is achievable, that peace is the only option, and peace is the only way to bring security for Israelis and Palestinians alike. So what you can do to our listener and viewer, invite us to speak online or physically at your communities, at your universities, with your parliament members and public and with your public representative. I know that I'm not speaking just for Hiba, May, and Hamze. There are so many Palestinian Israelis that speak for peace and will be delighted. Like I said, we are dedicating our life to reach sustainable peace. So invite us, and we'll be happy. And I see there are more than 200 participated to this, and it's over an hour and a half, hour and 15 minutes. So people do interested. There is a demand for peace. There is a demand for this voice, and we are here to answer this demand. So call us and support us. And also, I just want to also share what I'm doing now. Okay, and changing public opinions is crucial, but as entrepreneur, we're all sharing the same dream of lasting peace. We're all sharing the same values that were mentioned by all of us already, and we are all partners. We are all partners, and now we need to make strategy plan, and this is what more and more groups are doing at the moment. Build a strategy plan how to make peace happen. And then it will take us 6 months, I believe, to make a very solid plan and then to execute it. And I think if we'll work effectively and with enough determination, which I know we have, we're going to reach peace. We're going to make peace in 4 to 6 years from now, and maybe even much, much faster. So we need your support by believing, by imagining with us that peace is achievable and it's coming really soon. The power of dream is also being underestimated. So we must use this massive power and the power of solidarity, the power of partnership, the power of humanity. And then we will reach lasting peace in a few years.
Thanks, Maoz. Who'd like to go next? Hamze.
I agree with Maoz. I also have no hope with our politicians. I think the best I can expect from the world to help us with this is to hold them accountable, really as harsh as possible when they say outrageous things, when they come up with crazy ideas that clearly will make the situation worse, that the world hold them accountable and doesn't treat them as leaders who are worth respect, because leadership is practice. On the people level, we have to keep repeating the message. We have to normalize the message of peace. We have to explain that peace doesn't mean surrender. Peace doesn't mean to accept the status quo. It's the opposite. Peace means not surrendering to the status quo and imbalance, and remind people that whatever they're trying to protect didn't work, didn't give them happiness, didn't give them security, didn't give them even stability. 75 years and we're still in point zero, like everyone is still living with existential threat. So of course, if you want to think what could go wrong with peace, you can come up with a million reasons not to make peace. But it's what we have to think about is what peace could bring, given that the alternative is giving us the reality we have now. And this is not obvious for many people, and we have to make it obvious. We have to help them understand it. There are radical people who will not accept, will not buy in with our message, because they have agenda, they have their own pain and religious affiliation and things but they need to be isolated because they are influencing people, and the people in the middle, who are the majority, hardworking parents with kids and plans for the kids and life and so on. These people, just because they're traumatized and afraid, they are resonating sometimes with the crazy ideas. And we have to build the trust with people, because if we don't show that if we don't show that we are doing the right thing, then people will not trust us. We have no other choice. I know it sounds like a lot of work, but it is the work that we have to do. No other way.
Thanks, Hamze. Hiba?
Of course, I agree with my colleagues, and I will add other points. I think, but I just want to say something first. I think we have just seen that as May said, the conflict cannot continue to be managed. And we cannot go back to the pre-October 7th days. We have also seen the initial global reaction to the Hamas attacks, and then the global reaction, and I'm talking about the global reaction in terms of the street level, not the government. The global reaction at the street level immediately on October 7th and the next day, and then as the war on Gaza escalated, we saw the impact of the street level globally in terms of changing some policies and some and although the war has not ended yet and the ceasefire has not been instituted, I think the pressures are certainly there. So we need to listen to what the people want. We want to keep giving the people the voice and the space, and to listen to what the people want, and what the people want, as Hamze said, is really and of course Maoz, we want peace. I mean, what if you ask any youngster on the streets, what do they want? First of all, they want to live in peace and to have a welfare and to have social and economic benefits and so forth and so on. But from a Palestinian perspective, never under occupation. So how do we change this dynamic? And how do we give the Palestinians the security that they deeply desire, and the Israelis the security that they deeply desire? The Israelis live in fear, and the Palestinians live in fear. And the leaders have capitalized, the political decision makers, the extreme right on both sides have exploited this. So how do we change this trajectory? Is by not ignoring this conflict, by giving it the space, continuing the conversation going. Especially if the ceasefire is instituted, we cannot turn to other issues. I mean, we have ignored this conflict for the last 30 years, thinking that the conflict can be managed. We have been wrong. I mean, many of us have warned about the escalation. Many of us have warned day in, day out that the situation is not tenable, the situation is not stable. The incursions in the West Bank are creating a lot of hostilities. The situation in the holy sites in Jerusalem, especially during the holiday season, whether it's the Christian, the Muslim, Jewish holidays, I mean, you always have an escalation there. And those of us who are on the ground understand that the situation must be dealt with. So to achieve this security and to develop the much needed platform for discussion on shared humanity, on peace, these are not soft, empty words. I mean, human rights is not soft, empty words. Peace is not soft and empty. As Maoz said, we need to, let me quote you here, bridges, not walls, peace aid, not military aid. And I think that really sums it up very nicely.
Thanks, Hiba. May?
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. I will start by saying that the day after is now. The conversation about the day after is not a conceptual, philosophic, theoretical conversation. The day after is not even now. It's yesterday. You can take it back to whatever, say 2014 or 67 or 48 or to whenever. But the day after is not tomorrow. It's yesterday and to the latest today. And what I mean by that is that when people, I know that there is a whole discourse of ceasefire or not ceasefire, which I think is crazy, but coming from a place trying to be pragmatic, ceasefire needs to be connected to the day after, right? We need to stop the violence and the massacre in Gaza today in order to have a day after. And when we talk about what's happening in Gaza, and Hiba just said that, I think it's important to mention the awful, awful, awful violence happening in the West Bank, displacements of communities, what's happening, the violence going on in East Jerusalem, and the, I don't know what to say, non-democratic reality for Palestinian citizens of Israel today, which are being arrested for saying, Allahu Akbar, or kicked out of school, or kicked out of work, or and this connects me to another very important issue, which I think also is important for folks in the international community. We have been fighting in Israel 9 months for democracy in Israel, disconnecting it from the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's time that we understand that the coup that we were fighting against is now happening. It's already happened for Palestinian citizens of Israel. And we're next. We know that, right? That's how these things work. And so when we fight for the Supreme Court, but then don't fight for ending the violence, the systematic violence, which is so deeply connected, and what starts in Hawara ends in Tel Aviv, we know that. We have to start connecting the dots, all of those dots. So I want to start with saying that the day after is today. And that means that we have to all advocate today, not only for peace, but to say peace is possible. Peace is what will ensure security and safety for Israelis, for Jews around the world, and for Palestinians. When we talk about security, we have to start talking about security for Israelis and Palestinians, because that conversation has been dominated by security for one side, and we don't have security. And let me be a little more practical. Join Land for All. Join us. We are a growing movement. We work with all of these people. Join this movement. We have WhatsApp groups and we have newsletters. And I think that the obvious two things that can be physically done is, one, support us financially, because we're doing very, very important work around the world, and mainly in Israel-Palestine, but also on the policy level, advocating for these alternative ideas that should be the new reality. And number two is talk about us. As Maoz said, talk about us, interview us, write about us on your blogs, talk about us on podcasts, invite us to media outlets. Everyone needs to know that this is the choice of people who want life. And so as we are able to make this into the new normative, right, the new common sense, instead of this being the nonsense, that's when things will change. And so talk to your representatives, talk to your folks, talk to one person you know who would be interested in this, send them this recording, send them a link to one of us, connect us. Just we need to widen and spread this word as fast as possible, because every day we take more of a risk that this will be an even bigger crisis.
I think that's a good way to end. There are many questions that I would have liked to ask, and I'm sorry for people who asked questions that we weren't able to address most of them. But if you do have questions that you would like answered, one thing you can do is to send an email directly to me. I put it in the chat. But you can also, my email is Jonathan, JONATHAN @preventsuffering.org. And I'll do my best to forward your questions to the person that they're addressed to, and we'll try to get you answers. So yeah, I think this basically brings us to the end of the webinar, and I'd really like to extend my heartfelt thanks to all four of you for joining and for sharing your ideas and your inspiration. For those who are unable to attend, we will be uploading the recording to the OPIS YouTube channel, and we'll post a link on the Facebook event page, and we'll find a few other places to post the link so that everybody who wants to can view it and forward it. You can also find out more about OPIS on our website, preventsuffering.org, including links to subscribe or support our own work. And on that note, I wish everyone a very pleasant rest of the day, and let's all continue working towards peace.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jonathan. Really, thank you for all the work and effort you've been putting in this webinar. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Maoz. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.